Hey there everybody, Blind Rob here. Welcome back to Starting Out Solitary. I'm subbing in for Tarta this week. This is week 222 and we're talking about language in one's practice and in one's Book of Shadows. Let's get to it. Language. Language. As a bard, as a fili, as a poet seer, language is literally the primary tool by which I am able to practice my spiritual and metaphysical trade. It allows us to know, to learn, to understand, to share concepts, truths, to be able to communicate with one another, to connect with one another, to share so many vital things that enrich and improves one's life for the better. When it comes to language and one's practice, you gotta ask yourself, is your practice, be it your spirituality, your religion, or your magical or metaphysical practice, be it as a witch or a magician or whatever, is it based on a particular culture, especially on a particular culture whose folklore, whose mythology, whose folk magic, whose language goes all the way back towards pre-Christian years, pre-Christian cultures, and if so, how much are you focusing on it? How much are you allowing it to influence your practice? Even if you have a more eclectic kind of practice, you can still I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. You can still enrich your practice by looking up the various words that you find in modern sort of general neo-pagan practices that come from different cultures that a lot of people who have some sort of eclectic practice sort of incorporate into their own practice. Like, even if you have a basic knowing and understanding of it, it's always better. It will always improve your knowledge and understanding of such concepts, as well as you are utilizing, you are working with of those concepts, of those things within your practice. Enriching, that's the word that I was looking for earlier. Don't mind me. By taking the time and doing the research and putting in the effort and the energy to learn what exactly those concepts mean, what those words actually mean from the languages that they come from and the cultures that they are a part of. Because no matter how much you have such, what knowledge that you know, especially from a more present day, modern sort of everyday, general, neutral, cultural neutral kind of culture, it will always make things easier for you, better for you, and it will just enrich and improve and advance your practice beyond to the point that cannot be calculated or considered. As someone who practices a form of Irish paganism, of polytheism, as one who is a practicing bard, as a practicing fidi, as a practicing poet seer, someone who is building a form of witchcraft practice, firmly rooted in Irish culture, I am constantly looking at the living Irish culture, as well as medieval Irish culture and pre-Christian Irish culture, what we know of it, what we can learn from it. But more importantly, I am always looking towards the language, modern Irish, Middle Irish, Old Irish, Proto-Irish, all the way back to Proto-Indo-European languages. I am constantly doing the research. I put hours, days, even weeks, and sometimes even months of research just so that I can improve what I know about certain things that I'm wanting to work with, what I'm wanting to incorporate my practice in my practice, or want to base a piece of my practice upon. To give an example of this, I'm currently doing a little bit more research into the Rosk, or the Rosk? I cannot pronounce it to save my life. I'm going to have to put that through my my voice translator, see what it sounds like. But it's basically a form of invoking style, chant, spell, poem that is more focused on your own personal power instead of contacting and working with an external otherworldly force or being. It's actually like really, really important, especially in regards to my own practice, and it's something that I knew about. I had information on years and years ago, and I lost it, and I only found it the other day. It's like I knew of it, but I forgot the name of the word. I forgot what the word was, and I finally found it while I was looking for something completely different the other day. So, yeah. Anyway, I was just to give you an example of what I mean. Always study, always, try to research in the languages of what you are either basing the entirety of your practice upon or a part of your practice on. It helps. Some resources that I use personally in order to do this, I have a ton of Irish to English, English to Irish dictionaries and thesauruses, mostly in ebook format. I have a few primers, halfway decent primers on Old Irish and Proto-Irish. I also use two primary online resources. I use, I think it's called the Electronic Irish Dictionary. If I'm not saying that right, I apologize. I also use the Wixtionary website. I will post links to both of those places in the description box down below, just in case you're interested in checking them out. The Wixtionary one, of course, is not just for Irish language, it's just for languages in general. You can look at the etymology of words, what words mean, mutations of the word, variants of the word, so on and so forth. It's a really awesome site, and it's gone a long way to help me translate Om for myself and to improve upon and enrich my own practice when it comes to working with, divining with, and casting magic, using Om, performing rituals with Om, so on and so forth. It is an essential tool in my bardcraft and probably my witchcraft as well when I actually get around to building more of it. It's very relevant to me because I'd have to say about 99% of my practice is based on on Irish folklore, Irish mythology, Irish culture, be it present day Irish culture going all the way back to pre-Christian Irish culture, Proto-Irish culture, and the same with Scottish culture as well, to a certain but lesser extent than Irish. But you're gonna have to ask yourself, you're gonna have to figure it out for yourself. How relevant is this to me? Like, what languages am I using in my practices? What concepts are in my practices that might not necessarily come from an English source, that comes from another language, another culture? Do I know what that word actually mean, or do I only think I know? How much do I know of that? How much do I understand of that concept? Like I said, digging deeper, doing more research, and finding it out will enrich your practice beyond belief. The other way that one needs to look at language is in regards to their, I guess you could say, modern pagan, witchy, magical culture, because there's a lot of words and a lot that are connected to a lot of concepts that you find bandied about that are very common in today's general neo-pagan, general witchy, general whatever practice. I mean, look at Book of Shadows, for example. That's part of the topic that we're talking about here, that I'm talking about here right now. You got to ask yourself, what do those words mean? Are they relevant to me and my practice? Do they even exist? A good example of this is I got into a conversation with an acquaintance of mine in the spirit work community, and they were asking me about a bunch of different things loosely connected to divination, seership, trance work, spirit journeying, so on and so forth. And somewhere along the lines, they asked me, what do I do to open up my third eye and my crown chakras in order to, trance work, spirit journey, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, I don't do anything with chakras whatsoever. That's not a part of my practice. That has nothing to do with the culture that my practice is heavily based upon. So I only know the bare bone basics of it. But yeah, I don't utilize it. I don't work with those concepts. Same with Reiki. I had another person who knows that I do energy work, and they asked me, well, do you do Reiki? Actually, they more or less assumed that I did, and asked if I would do I think it's called remote Reiki for them, and I'm like, no, I don't practice Reiki whatsoever. And which I have friends who do practice Reiki, and from what little I've been able to talk to them about it and what little that they have described it to me, it sounds like it is a very powerful, a very beautiful practice, but it's not relevant to me or my practice. It's not something that belongs in my personal worldview. It doesn't exist as far as, what I do, how I do things, and why, and so on and so forth. And, a lot of things are like that. It's like, for example, do I have a book that I keep all my information, knowledge, lore, how I do things, some of the frameworks for the more common types of rituals, spells, poetry, so on and so forth that I do? Yeah. Do I call it a Book of Shadows? No. And that's because that word, I don't know all, like, I do not have complete knowledge of, let alone complete understanding of that concept, where it came from, the culture behind it. It means nothing to me personally. Not to say that it's not valid, because it is a valid thing. There are plenty of people who use that word in, Book of Shadows, or grimoire, or something like that, means something to them. And as for me, whenever I make such a book or books in the vaguest of similar of terms, I would call it something along the lines of Book of Streams, Book of Memory, Book of Lore, Book of Wisdom, Book of Inspiration, Book of Steam, Book of Mist, Book of Cauldrons, Book of Flames. Something that has at least some sort of loose connection to Filiac, to the vocation, to the calling, to the path of the poet, to the bard, to concepts of inspiration and wisdom, and knowledge within, an Irish concept. I might even call it the Book of Hazels or the Book of Hazelnuts, for example. Those would also be appropriate and, relevant to refer to them as. Same with Sabbats and Esbats. I don't use those terms either, and I tend to call my solar festivals solar festivals, lunar festivals lunar festivals, and I know that I get into a bit of confrontation with people who don't understand why I don't just go by what most people in present day common forms of neo-pagan practices call it by, simply because that's what most people know. But once again, that's going to be up to the individual person and deciding how important language is to their practice. For me as a bard, as a fiddy, it is essential. And it's not so much that just, you know, calling it whatever. Part of my practice is being very specific, being very truthful about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So it's being very specific. You know, knowing is half of it. The other half of it is saying it what it is instead of what you think it is. But that's just me, and that's just my practice. Your practice is going to be different, and it's just going to be just as valid as anyone else's, within reason. And yeah. So I hope this video kind of makes you think, and I apologize that it's rambly, you know, like all my other videos, especially one here. But those are just how I think of things. I hope that you got, you know, you took something from this video, and I hope it helped. May Bríde bless, illuminate, and inspire you always. Sláinte.